Hello everybody, AB from Blender 52. Today we're going to be talking about normal maps, how to make them, and more importantly, why you should be using them. Okay, so let's begin. We're going to start off with a basic plane and we're just going to add some geometry using some loop cuts. Once you've got our loop cuts, we're just going to bevel those out slightly. And then we're going to select these edges. And if you remember from the last video, we can use Control Shift Plus to select those extra faces. Drag those down. And then I'm just going to use my bevel tool shortcut to give it a bit of a bevel there. So when making normal maps, having a bit of a bevel or a subdivision modifier is always going to give you a better result when baking your map, just for that little bit of roundness, that smoothness. So once we've created our map or our geometry that we want to create a map from, we're just going to go into top view. Let's just cursor to selected, add in another plane, and we're just going to raise that plane slightly above our geometry plane. Okay. Now the next thing you need to do is give your new plane a material, and then you need to add in an image texture. Okay, you don't need to connect anything. And then you're just going to say new, and we can call this normal. And from here you can give it whatever size you want. Generally for normal maps, you don't really need much higher than 1024 for their use case, but you can make it 2K just for the sake of it. And then you can say OK. And then we're going to go back into our top view. We're going to select both our objects. We're going to go into the render properties, down to bake. Okay, we're going to here bake type, we're going to select normal. And then very important, you need to click this selected to active. So what that means is you've got two things selected and your top plane is your active element. So the selected to the active. Back into top view, and then we're just going to hit bake. Now you'll see this might take a little bit of time, so I'm just going to speed up the video for you with the magic of the internet. Well, look at that, it's actually already done. So what we can now do is we can just, if we want to see what our normal map looks like, we can connect that socket and go into rendered mode. And there you can see we've got a normal map. So if we create another plane, give it a material, and we come here and we say image texture, and now from your drop down you can choose normal, which is what we just created. We're going to add in a normal map. Always select the wrong one the first time. Normal map. Connect those. And now you can see that our plane without any geometry on it has got that look. And if you turn down the roughness, you can really start to see that it looks like it's got that geometry. Okay, so what is the point of actually creating this normal map? Why not just use the geometry that we've made? It looks better. We already made it. So why even make the normal map? Well, obviously when it comes to render time, a flat piece of geometry with one face is going to render a whole lot faster than this piece of geometry with many faces. Okay, so another great use case is PBR materials versus procedural materials. So a PBR material is a physically based rendering material in that it uses an image texture versus a procedural texture, which is using a node setup. So if we look at this first little knob over here, you can see that we've got two wave textures with opposite angles that are multiplying against each other to give us this kind of knurled pattern. Whereas on this one, we're using a simple image texture to create the pattern, which is just a normal map. Now, tests have shown that an image-based texture can save your render time up to 40%. That's huge. When you're working on a massive project with lots of detail, having image-based textures versus node-based textures is just going to save you a lot of time. Okay, so beside the practical applications, we can actually do some really fun things with normal maps as well. So what I've done is I've created this little set of loops, okay? And I've got my plane there. And the reason that the plane is smaller is so that it can be tiled. So I've already baked out all my maps. So if I just connect that one, you can see there's my normal map. And it's tiling in that if I move another instance over, you can see that it will infinitely repeat itself. Now, tiling can take you a little bit of back and forth and a little bit of time to get used to, but it can be very important in your normal map creation so that if you need to scale your map up or down, it tiles seamlessly. Okay, so in this case, I've also created an ambient occlusion map, and that would be made in the exact same way that we created our normal map, in that you come down to bake and you would just choose ambient occlusion. Okay, and then I've also created an alpha map, and I'll show you how to do that in a little bit. So what can we actually use this for? Okay, so let's just pop in a UV sphere real quick. Shrink that down a little bit. We're going to shade smooth. And then let's add a plane, make that a little bit smaller as well and raise that up. Let's subdivide it, say 30 times. And we're going to make this a collision, and we are going to make this a cloth. And on our timeline, it must be in the wrong place. So let's just run that simulation again. There it is. So let's just smooth out our cloth, add a subdivision onto it, and let's go back a few frames where we'll find a spot where it's not intersecting itself so badly. So what can we do now? Let's create a image texture for this cloth. And we're just going to use our images to create a chainmail pattern. So let's just say texture, image texture, and we're going to come down here, vector, normal map, drag that in there. And from here, we're going to select link normal, plug that into there. Let's drag this across. We need a mix shader, and we need a transparent shader. And let's make it metallic, drop the roughness a bit. Let's get another one of these, and we're going to change this one to the ambient occlusion map that I created. And then let's duplicate this guy again, and we are just going to take the alpha link AO. Okay, and we're going to put that in there like that. And let's see what it's looking like. Okay, so at the moment it is looking a bit weird. Okay, and that is because we need to scale it a bit. So let's scale it to say 30. And there you can see we're starting to get something, but we need to obviously connect these to our other maps as well. Okay, and we need to swap these around. And now you can see we've got chainmail without any geometry, and we're not using these actual links. This is just a plane. You can see we can zoom in nice and close, and because of the ambient occlusion map, that really looks like geometry. So you're using a normal map for a bit of bump, the ambient occlusion to bring in your shading, and then you've got the alpha just to knock out the rest. So that's all just with baked maps. Okay, so there are a few very important things to remember, so I'm just going to run through this again. Okay, so the first step is that you want to have this image texture that is in your material for your plane. Okay, and you need to create a new image every time you create a new map. Okay, so let's call this normal 2. And now I want to show you what happens when your scale isn't correct. So you must always make sure that all your scales are set to 1. So at the moment, you'll see that this plane is set to a very odd scale. So let's bake everything again. We're going to have our plane selected. Then we're going to select everything else. We need to come to normal, and we need to make sure that we have this selected to active ticked. So in other words, it's the selected items transferring to the active item. Let's hit bake, and this time it is going to need to be sped up because there are multiple items. Okay, and it's done. So let's connect this new normal map and we can have a look. Okay, so we've got our normal map now. Now, another very important thing you have to do in this creation process is you need to come here to image editor. Let's go to normal 2, which is the new one we just made. And you have to save this art. If you don't save this art, when you open your project the next time, it will be gone. You will need to rebake it. So you have to save this art as an image texture. So it's an image, save as. We're just going to go into this new folder too, and we're going to save out our image texture. Okay, so now I just want to show you the difference between my original normal map and the new normal map that I just made where the scale was wrong. So if we look at the original normal map, we can see that everything is nice and smooth and rounded. Whereas if we look at the new map, we can see that it's very flat. It's almost like it's got a bevel as opposed to round geometry. And that is purely because our plane wasn't set to the correct scale. It wasn't set to a 1:1:1 scale. So that is very important. Okay, next up, I'm just going to quickly show you how to create an alpha map. So if you were to say save out your ambient occlusion as a PNG with an alpha channel, you would have technically an alpha map that you could use the alpha channel to block it out. But if you want a purely black and white alpha map, this is how you would create it. Okay, so we're going to create a new material for our actual rings, and we're going to take the emission value and we're going to turn it all the way up. So if we go into preview mode, you can now see it's got that bit of a glow to it. Okay, so let's select the rest of our rings and we're going to apply the material to all of them. So now we've got that nice glowing on all of them. Okay, we're going to go above. We've put in a new image map into this alpha 2 texture. So we select our plane, we select everything else. We're going to come to emit. Okay, we've got selected to active on. We're going to hit bake. And again, we're going to have to speed it up. Okay, and it's done. So now, if we take this new map that we've just created and we bring it into color, you can see that we have a nice alpha map. Black and white only, and that is what I used to cut out the chainmail. Okay, so one more quick practical application that I've got. I've created this metal material where I've obviously used the normal map to create the bump. I've got my ambient occlusion to create this little bit of dirt around the bumps in the material, and I've also got a alpha channel which I'm using to make the tops of the bump a little bit brighter and a little bit more glossy like they would be in real life, because they would obviously be a bit more worn out. Okay, so I've got these bunch of different normal maps that I've created here. We've got different rings and knurls and this grip normal, which you can use on, say, the grip of a pistol. I've also got the metal texture I've just shown you, as well as the chainmail, and I'm going to throw all of these up on Patreon. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our Patreon supporters, Mr. Nigel Hillier, Crow3D, Unfi Killianzi, and our new supporter Lee Boynton, which I hope I am saying correctly. If you would like to support our channel, please head on over to patreon.com/blender52. Thank you so much for watching the video. Please give us a subscribe and a like. Cheers.